Brazil has been abysmal this 2026 World Cup cycle, and just recently they ended their worst World Cup qualifying campaign ever. It was bad. Now, it wasn't as bad as Santos or Vasco over the past few seasons, but it was bad. However, there is hope, because Brazil did in fact sign a world-class coach last minute, hoping that he will save them on time for the World Cup, and his name is Carlo Ancelotti. So what have we learned so far in the Brazil Ancelloti era? Can he get this team back on track on time for the 2026 World Cup? Can he make them legit contenders? Let's talk about it. Hello. If you're new here, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Chapéu Football, where you will find the best coverage of Brazilian football in English on YouTube. So make sure you are subscribed for that. Today, I will be talking briefly about the Chile and Bolivia games that Brazil just played, but I mainly want to dive into all the negative records in the terrible World Cup qualifying campaign that Brazil had. Now, they qualified to the World Cup, which is, I guess, job done, but it was abysmal, it was terrible, it was a disgrace. But at the same time, there is hope. And based on Ancelotti's roster selections, starting 11, and interviews, I'm going to give you 5 things that I have learned so far that I think he's thinking and that I think he will do. Essentially, 5 lessons. And yes, Neymar, he is definitely one of them, and I'm going to talk about that at the end of this video. And listen, when we get to the very end of this video, I will rate the Ancelotti era from 1 to 10 so far, obviously, right? Ultimately, he'll get judged on how he does in the World Cup, but I'll give it a rating from 1 to 10, with 5 being average. Let me know your rating in the comment section down below from 1 to 10. Do you think Ancelotti's doing a good job, bad job? What are your thoughts, and what do you think Brazil can accomplish in the 2026 World Cup? And of course, make sure to hit the like button. Those who do not hit the like button are losers. Do not be a loser. Okay, let's quickly talk about the September window that literally just happened. And this one ended with a 3-0 win against Chile in the Maracanã, and then a 1-0 loss to Bolivia away in the altitude. And it was a bit of a weird window because Brazil had already qualified, Ancelotti was testing, and the games didn't really matter for Brazil specifically. Now, the Chile game, which was the first one, I thought Brazil played well for the most part. They played with a 4-2-2-2 formation, or you could just call it a 4-4-2 formation, but in possession, it would shift to a back 3. Now, understand that the context matters, and it was a 3-0 win at home against Chile, and Chile sucks these days. Seriously, the downfall of the Chile national team must be studied. Like, this team had a golden generation that won 2 Copa Americas in a row. They almost eliminated Brazil in the 2014 World Cup. And ever since the generation with Alexis Sanchez, Vidal, Jorge Valdivia that played for Palmeiras a long time ago, ever since that generation went away, Chile became like a Serie C team, like a 3rd division team in Brazil. They've been terrible. Also, a big reason why Brazil got the 3-0 win was because of the late subs. Paquetá was great off the bench. Welcome back to the national team, by the way. Luis Henrique, former Botafogo, was tremendous. They were incredible and helped Brazil get the 3-0 win. Now, game 2 was against Bolivia. And honestly, I'm not going to talk about it too much, because this game is everything you think about CONMEBOL. Stupid is what stupid does, and CONMEBOL is really good at that, being stupid and playing a game at 4,000 meters of altitude is so unserious, and that's what they did. The refs also were complete and utter crap. It was just a mess of a game where you can't really read into it too much. You can't overreact. Obviously, losing to Bolivia is terrible. That's not really a good team, but just how they portrayed this game makes it so unserious that I don't think there's much we can analyze from it. So with that said, let's talk about Brazil's overall campaign in World Cup qualifying, because it was the worst in the history of this country, and I still think there's a lot to be optimistic about despite how things have gone so far this cycle. So ever since CONMEBOL started this World Cup qualifying format in 1996, with all 10 nations facing each other in home and away games, Brazil has never had less than 30 points. This time, they ended with 28. Brazil also always finished first in World Cup qualifying CONMEBOL, except for the 2002 World Cup cycle, where they finished in 3rd place with 30 points and somewhat struggled to qualify at that time. Funny enough, the 2002 World Cup was the last World Cup Brazil actually won. And the funny part about it all is that Brazil did struggle throughout the cycle. That cycle was also a bit of a mess, but they hired Felipão, Scolari, Big Phil, whatever you want to call him, roughly 1 year before the 2002 World Cup. Does that ring a bell? Kind of similar to what Brazil is doing right now with Carlo Ancelotti. They struggled the whole cycle. Brazil's had an interim coach, Dorival Jr., that's a bad coach, Fernando Diniz, that coached Fluminense and Brazil at the same time. This cycle has been a mess. 2001 was also a mess. They had, I believe, 3 different coaches as well. And ultimately, Felipão took over 1 year prior, just like Ancelloti in this specific cycle. Are you superstitious? I don't know, man. This might be a sign. So the campaign this cycle was so bad that Brazil finished in 5th place. And listen, if it wasn't for the expanded World Cup, because the 2026 World Cup will have 48 teams and not 32, Brazil would not have qualified directly to it. They would have headed to the Interconfederate playoff, the repescagem. So this is how bad it was. For the first time ever, Brazil would not have qualified directly to the World Cup. They would have to go play a playoff match to make it. And mind you, Brazil has never missed a single World Cup. But wait, this is not an infomercial, but there is more. Let's go through the plenty of negative records that Brazil had this cycle in World Cup qualifying. It's a lot, so bear with me. So Brazil broke a few records this cycle, negative records. They're not really good. It was the record for lowest amount of points at 28, record for the worst placed finish at 5th, record for the least amount of wins with 8 wins in 18 games, record for the most amount of losses with 6 losses in 18 games, record for the most goals conceded, 17 in 18 games. And listen, the part where I say most amount of goals conceded, they conceded 17 in 18 games. Understand that Ancelotti's team, he was in charge for the last 4 games. He got 3 clean sheets, and Brazil only conceded 1 goal, which was against Bolivia, in those 4 games. So if he was not in charge, that record would have been even higher. Brazil also had its worst defeat in World Cup qualifying history with a 4-1 loss to their rivals Argentina. It's bad. But to be fair, this is not really on Carlo Ancelotti. He got 1 draw against Ecuador, which is one of the best teams in South America right now. Ancelotti also got 2 wins and 1 loss, which was the Bolivia away game, for whatever that's worth. Okay, we went through this cycle. It was a disaster, and we had 4 games with Ancelotti in charge so far. What have we learned? What do we think Ancelotti is thinking? Does he have players that are untouchable? Do we have players that will never make the roster? What are his tactics? Let me give you now 5 lessons that I've learned so far. And while I do that, you drop a like in this video if you haven't already, and you let me know in the comment section down below, what have you learned from Ancelotti this cycle? Not this cycle, the past 4 games. Like, what is he thinking? Okay, my first takeaway based on Ancelotti's roster decisions and interviews is that Neymar will not make it to the 2026 World Cup. Unfortunately, I'm a big Neymar fan. I think he's an incredible player, but I don't think he'll be there. So Carlo spoke specifically about Neymar being left out of the roster, and he said, it's the truth. It was a technical decision based on many things. So that means Neymar was not left out because of injuries or fitness. He just doesn't think Neymar is good enough for the Brazilian national team right now. But Ancelotti had also something else to say, which wasn't specifically about Neymar, but it felt like an indirect message. This is what he said. The players need to play more for the team than for themselves. It may be that I field a player who has less technical quality, but who is more effective for the team, which honestly, that seems like a jab on Neymar. So just based on his roster decisions, interviews, I don't think Neymar will make it to the 2026 World Cup. This reminds me a lot of when Ronaldinho came back to Brazil. I believe he was playing for Flamengo in 2009, and some people thought Dunga could bring him to the 2010 World Cup, and I believe Ronaldinho even played in the Olympics in 2008 for Brazil. You could see the talent with Ronaldinho. On the ball, he was incredible, but he just wasn't there physically and mentally. And I think there's a lot of similarities between that version of Ronaldinho at the end of his career and the current version of Neymar. The talent is there, he can win you games, but he's not at that level to win you a World Cup anymore. It seems like mentally, he's kind of clocked out. But I hope I'm wrong, and I hope Neymar is there. Now, lesson number 2, or takeaway number 2, is that Carlo Ancelotti has a few players that are simply untouchable. And if they're healthy, if they're fit, they will be in the World Cup and they will be locked-in starters. Who are they? And based on his selections and interviews, Marquinhos, Casemiro, and Bruno Guimarães are all untouchable under Carlo Ancelotti. About Casemiro, he even went as far as saying that there aren't Brazilian players with the same characteristics as Casemiro. So if they're fit, they will start. Now, of course, maybe Rafinha, Vinicius, they could also be untouchable, but those three, Ancelotti kind of mentioned throughout interviews, and we know for a fact that they're untouchable. Marquinhos, Casemiro, and Bruno Guimarães. I'm not saying I agree with that, and there's a lot of question marks about Bruno Guimarães and his performances for the national team. Casemiro, which is definitely not the best version of himself these days. And Marquinhos is a world-class center back, one of the best in the world, but even for Brazil, at times he's shaky. But again, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you what Ancelotti is saying. Takeaway number 3 is that Carlo Ancelotti is still experimenting with system, formations, and how this team will play. He's a very reactive coach and he adapts very often. So in the first game, we saw a 4-4-2 against Chile, more specifically, where we shift to a back three in possession. Now against Bolivia, we saw a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes it looks like a 4-2-3-1, sometimes it looks like a 4-3-3. And we saw that in the games also against Ecuador. We saw in previous games as well for Brazil. So he's still experimenting, he's adaptive, he's reactive. I will probably make a video on how I think Brazil should be set up. We'll talk about that tactically. But what I like about Carlo Ancelotti is that he is not stubborn, and it's showing. We knew that before with Real Madrid and many others. He's not stubborn, he adapts to win. And I also want to say, against Chile, we played with a two-man midfield centrally. It was Casemiro and Bruno Guimarães. I think against weaker teams that works. But when you're facing stronger opposition, we probably will need a three-man midfield. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. And I think Ancelotti knows that, obviously. He's much smarter than me when it comes to football. But I'll make a separate video talking about how I think Brazil should set up, the tactics and all that. Okay, takeaway number 4. And this one I already had before Ancelotti was in charge, and I still have it. The fullbacks, or the laterais, it still is Brazil's Achilles heel. The problem is a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and our weak link are the fullbacks right now. They're just not good enough. Like, you talk about like Wesley, for example. Really good going forward, even though he didn't look that good for Brazil, but he's good going forward. The dude can't defend. Douglas Santos. Not a terrible player by any means, just very mediocre. And then you can get to many others that haven't really stood out for the Brazilian national team. Alexandro wasn't there, but it seems like to be a player that Ancelotti likes. The fullbacks are a bit of a problem, which is weird because in the past we had Cafu, Roberto Carlos, Marcelo, Dani Alves, and many others before that. Right now it seems to be a bit of a problem, and that's one thing I don't think he can fix. So if I was Ancelotti, I would just go for whatever fullbacks are better defensively. In lesson number 5, and this is the optimistic one, he is bringing back belief in this team. Ignore the Bolivia loss for a second. Don't be reactionary towards that, where Brazil had a bunch of subs and we were playing on an insane altitude in terrible conditions. The belief in this team is at an all-time high for this cycle. People actually are starting to believe that this team could possibly do something in the 2026 World Cup with Ancelotti. While if we still had Dorival Jr. in charge, I don't know, I think Brazil would probably, at best, make it to the quarterfinals. What I'm saying is that he's changing the energy around this team, the vibe and the belief, something this nation had lost over the past few years. Things are looking more promising. Ancelotti hasn't really been heavily tested yet, but it's looking better, right? The defenses look better, the team has looked better. Just the behavior on the field has looked better when compared to the previous 2 or 3 years. World Cup is a short tournament, and as I said before, Felipão took over the team 1 year prior in 2001, and then he won the 2002 World Cup. Could Ancelotti do the same? You let me know in the comment section down below. Do you think Brazil can win the next World Cup? Yes or no? Do you like the direction this program is going? Let us know your thoughts. Okay, last but not least, what do I rate Ancelotti's work so far from 1 to 10? I'm gonna give him an 8. And listen, if you give him a 5, that's not bad. 5 is average, but I'm gonna give him an 8. Ignore the Bolivia game for a second. As I said, that game was madness. That's not real football. His work has been good. Ecuador, we're gonna say, we tied Ecuador away. That's a good result. Ecuador is arguably the second or third best team in South America right now. They're the best defense. That's a great team. That's not a bad result to tie Ecuador away, and that was Ancelotti's first game. And then he got 2 more wins, and then the Bolivia game. And 3 clean sheets in the games that Brazil actually played real football. So far, the job done has been good. He just started. He has a few months to figure out the player pool a bit more, test in the next few friendlies. Brazil has games in October, November, and then March. So there's 6 more games before he calls up the final roster. And so far, I think he's done a formidable job. Now, ultimately, he's going to get judged based on how Brazil does in the World Cup. If he wins every single friendly leading into the World Cup, does an incredible job, and Brazil loses in the quarterfinals, it was a crap job. That's where he will be judged. But so far, I would say, so good. Alright everyone, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to drop a like before you go and subscribe to the channel. Help us grow. We've been growing incredibly fast thanks to you, and I appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. The next episode will probably be how I would set up Brazil, how you can fix Brazil tactically in player selections. Not that it matters, as I said, Ancelloti knows more than me, but I thought I would dive into it. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.